Ladies and gentlemen, let's raise a glass. The ballroom at the downtown hotel went silent as my boss, Richard Keller, stood at the podium. His voice boomed across the chandeliers and velvet curtains. Every face turned to him, champagne flutes glittering in their hands. It was supposed to be a night of celebration. The launch of our newest product line. The one I had poured 2 years of my life into. The one I'd sacrificed weekends, birthdays, and even the last few months of my marriage for. But Richard had other plans. "She's leaving," he said with a smirk, his eyes finding mine across the room. She never really had what it takes. The room erupted in polite laughter and applause, like trained seals responding to their master's cue. My name wasn't even mentioned. I was just she. Disposable. I felt my throat tighten, but I didn't flinch. I stood slowly, smoothed the hem of my blazer, and picked up the envelope I'd been carrying all evening. My hand didn't shake as I walked to the podium. "To Richard," I said, raising my glass. My voice was steady, almost calm. "From the company's biggest failure." I set the envelope in front of him and turned on my heel. No tears, no protest, just silence. Behind me, I heard the rip of paper, then Richard's voice breaking. "What the hell is this?" But I didn't stop walking. I should introduce myself. My name is Linda Harris. I was 43 years old, and until that night, I was the head of product development at Stonemount Technologies, one of Chicago's fastest-growing firms. For 11 years, I gave that company everything. I started as a junior analyst, stayed late when others left early, carried projects on my back while executives like Richard claimed the credit. And I believed in it. I believed that if I worked hard enough, if I proved myself, I'd earn the recognition I deserved. But I was wrong. 3 weeks earlier, Richard called me into his office. He leaned back in his leather chair, all false charm and manicured confidence. "Linda, you've been doing good work, but this launch, it needs a fresh face, energy. Someone younger. We'll have Jason present instead." Jason, the intern I trained, a 25-year-old with good hair and no experience. I stared at Richard, waiting for the punchline. "Excuse me?" "You'll still be part of the team," he said with mock sympathy. "But it's time we show investors a more dynamic leader. Don't take it personally." Don't take it personally. That was the day I realized I had no future at Stonemount. Not because I wasn't capable, but because Richard had decided I was replaceable. Disposable. What he didn't know was that I'd already seen the cracks in his empire. For months, I'd noticed irregularities in the reports. Product testing results that didn't line up, expenses signed off without proper documentation, inflated performance metrics in investor decks. Every time I brought them up, Richard waved me off. "You're overthinking again, Linda. Focus on the product." But my instincts told me otherwise. And I had learned long ago. Instincts don't lie. So I started keeping records, copies of reports, email threads, meeting notes. Quietly, carefully. Not because I wanted revenge, not yet. But because something in my gut whispered that one day I'd need them. That day came sooner than I expected. The night of the launch, I knew what Richard was planning. The smirk, the toast, the dismissal disguised as a joke. He wanted to humiliate me, to show the board that he was in control, that he could push out the woman who had built the very product they were celebrating. But I wasn't going to leave quietly. The envelope I placed on the podium? It wasn't just paper. It was the culmination of 6 months of documentation. Evidence of manipulated product data, falsified safety certifications, and doctored investor reports. All under Richard's direction. Inside were copies of contracts and memos that proved our flagship product, the one they toasted that night, hadn't passed critical safety tests. That Richard had buried those results to rush the launch and impress investors. And I wasn't the only one who had them. When I walked out of that ballroom, past the clapping colleagues and the wide-eyed interns, I felt a strange calm settle over me. For the first time in months, I wasn't afraid. I didn't go home right away. Instead, I drove through the rain-slicked streets of Chicago, headlights blurring against the glass. My hands gripped the wheel, my mind replaying the sacrifices I'd made. The dinners I'd missed with my daughter Emma, the fights with my husband that eventually broke us. All for a company that had decided I was worthless. But they had underestimated me. Richard thought I'd crumble, that I'd accept the insult and fade away quietly. But he had no idea that I'd already contacted someone who was very interested in what I'd found. His laughter at the podium was still echoing in my ears when I pulled into my driveway. Only this time, I wasn't the one being laughed at, because Richard Keller had no idea how fast his empire was about to collapse. And I wasn't done yet. When I woke the next morning, sunlight streamed through the blinds, but there was no peace in it. My phone had already buzzed half a dozen times. Missed calls from Richard, 2 from our HR director, Marianne, 1 from a number I didn't recognize. I ignored them all. Instead, I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table, staring at the briefcase I'd brought home months earlier. Inside, beneath layers of ordinary paperwork, were files I'd been collecting since Richard took over as CEO 18 months ago. The first irregularities seemed small. Travel expenses signed without receipts, bonuses distributed without board approval. But then it escalated. Product safety results altered, emails instructing staff to reframe numbers before investor calls, contracts signed with suppliers that never delivered. I should have walked away then. But part of me believed I could fix it, that my job was to protect the company I had given more than a decade of my life to. Now, as I opened the briefcase, I realized this was no longer about protecting Stonemount. It was about protecting myself. And maybe, just maybe, protecting the people who trusted the company's products with their lives. By noon, the calls turned into voicemails. "Linda, it's Richard. We need to talk. You've made a mistake. This is Marianne from HR. Please call me back immediately. We need to discuss your exit paperwork." And finally, one that made my stomach twist. "This is Daniel Briggs, legal counsel for Stonemount Technologies. It's imperative you return the documents you removed. Failure to do so may result in legal action." Legal action. They were moving fast, but so was I. At 2 o'clock, I drove to the west side, to a small bank I'd opened a safe deposit box at years ago. The clerk greeted me with a smile, clearly recognizing me as a longtime customer. "Morning, Ms. Harris." I nodded politely and asked for access to my box. Inside, I placed duplicates of the most damning files: the falsified safety test results, the emails with Richard's initials approving them, the doctored investor presentation slides. I locked it up tight. I wasn't naive. I knew evidence in my home could disappear in a burglary. But evidence in a bank vault? That was harder to erase. When I returned to my car, I sat for a long moment, staring at the steering wheel. My heart thudded against my ribs. This wasn't a game anymore. Richard wasn't just trying to humiliate me at a party. He was trying to silence me. That evening, I called Emma, my daughter. She was 21, a senior in college, juggling classes and part-time work at a bookstore. "Mom, what's going on?" she asked the second she picked up. "I saw something online. People are saying you left Stonemount." I hesitated. I didn't want to worry her, but I also couldn't lie. "It's true. Richard pushed me out." "That's insane. You've given them everything." "I know." My throat tightened. "But listen, Emma, I need you to focus on school. Don't get involved in this." Silence stretched on the line. "Are you in trouble?" "No," I lied softly. "I'm handling it. I just need you to trust me." When we hung up, I sat in the quiet of my kitchen, staring at the phone in my hand. The truth was, I wasn't sure how much trouble I was in, but I knew one thing. Richard's panic meant I had more power than I'd realized. On Sunday, a black SUV idled outside my house for over an hour. I pretended not to notice, drawing the curtains and keeping the lights low. By the time it drove away, my decision was made. I couldn't fight Richard alone. I needed help. Someone outside Stonemount. Someone who wouldn't be intimidated by corporate lawyers or silenced by money. That night, I dug out an old contact card from the back of my desk drawer. It belonged to Sarah Levin, a former colleague who had left the industry years ago to work with a consumer safety watchdog group. We hadn't spoken in nearly a decade, but I remembered the last thing she said to me before leaving. "Linda, one day you'll realize some battles aren't meant to be fought inside the company. Call me when that day comes." It was time. My hands trembled as I dialed her number. After 3 rings, she answered. "Linda Harris," she said, her voice calm but firm, as if she'd been expecting this call all along. "Tell me what you've got." I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I pulled together a clean folder of evidence and notes, stripping away anything that could be dismissed as interpretation and leaving only hard facts. As the hours ticked by, I felt something shift inside me. Fear was still there, yes. But alongside it came clarity. Richard thought I was just a failure he could humiliate and discard. What he didn't understand was that failures don't usually have receipts. And by Monday morning, those receipts would be in the hands of people who knew exactly what to do with them. Monday morning arrived gray and heavy, the kind of Chicago day where the sky feels like concrete pressing down. I barely touched my coffee. My nerves weren't about caffeine. They were about the folder sitting in my bag and the meeting ahead. Sarah had been clear on the phone. "Bring only what you're comfortable losing. Keep the rest secure. We'll start with enough to get their attention." By 9 o'clock, I was walking through the revolving glass doors of a midtown office building, my heels clicking against the marble floor. The lobby directory read, "Consumer Safety Watch Alliance, Suite 1500. The receptionist greeted me warmly, as if I weren't just another stranger. "Ms. Harris? Sarah's expecting you." When I stepped into the conference room, Sarah rose from her chair with the same steady energy I remembered. Her hair was streaked with gray now, but her eyes were sharp, assessing. She hugged me briefly before motioning to 2 other people at the table. "This is Mark Collins, investigative journalist with the Tribune, and Alicia Morales, a litigation attorney who specializes in whistleblower protection." For a moment, my throat closed. This was bigger than I had imagined. I'd thought we'd talk strategy, maybe explore options. Instead, I was staring at 2 professionals who could take my story public and defend me in court. I placed the folder on the table. My voice was quiet, but firm. "This is just a fraction of what I've collected, enough to show a pattern." Mark leaned forward immediately, flipping through copies of test reports, email threads, and financial documents. His brows furrowed. "These safety certifications, if they're falsified, that's a huge liability. We're talking recalls, lawsuits, maybe even criminal charges." Alicia glanced up from her notes. "And your termination? When did that happen?" "Technically, they haven't processed it yet. Richard tried to push me out at the launch event. HR's been calling nonstop." Her lips tightened. Classic. They want you to sign something that waives your rights before you realize the leverage you have. Don't sign anything. Not a severance package, not a resignation. Sarah rested her hands flat on the table. "Linda, you need to understand something. Once you step into this, there's no turning back. Richard will fight dirty. The company will paint you as disgruntled, unstable, anything to discredit you. Are you ready for that?" I thought of Emma, of the years I'd missed bedtime stories and soccer games because I was chasing deadlines, of the envelope on Richard's podium, his smug face turning red, of the black SUV parked outside my house. "Yes," I said quietly. "I'm ready." The meeting lasted 3 hours. We mapped out next steps. Alicia would file for federal whistleblower protection, ensuring retaliation could be challenged legally. Mark would begin verifying the documents independently, but nothing would be published until we were secure. Sarah's group would prepare to notify regulators if the internal channels failed. By the time I walked out of the building, the weight on my shoulders hadn't disappeared, but it had shifted. I wasn't alone anymore. Still, fear lingered. That evening, while I cooked a simple dinner of pasta and salad, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Richard or HR. It was Emma. "Mom, are you okay? I saw another post online. Some guy claiming you were escorted out by security?" My grip on the wooden spoon tightened. Don't believe everything you read. I wasn't escorted out. I walked out on my own. But is it true? Did they really fire you? I hesitated. They tried. Let's just say I didn't make it easy. Emma sighed. I hate that they're treating you like this. You've worked so hard for them. I swallowed against the lump in my throat. That's exactly why I'm not letting them bury this. One day you'll understand why standing your ground matters, even when it costs you. There was a pause. Then her voice softened. I think I already do. At 9 o'clock sharp, a knock rattled my front door. I froze. Through the peephole, I saw Richard himself standing on my porch, his jaw tight, his tailored suit out of place in my modest neighborhood. Linda, open the door, he called, his voice sharp but forced calm. We need to settle this before it gets out of hand. I didn't move. My heart hammered in my chest, but I stayed silent. After a long moment, he pulled a thick envelope from his briefcase and slid it under the door. This is my final offer. Sign it and this all goes away. You'll be comfortable for the rest of your life. I waited until his car pulled away before picking it up. The severance offer was larger than before. 5 years' salary, a non-disclosure clause, immediate payout. But as I stared at it, I knew the truth. Comfort bought by silence wasn't comfort at all. I placed the envelope in the shredder. The sound of paper tearing was louder than his voice in my memory. That night, I lay in bed wide awake, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the distant whoosh of traffic. Richard thought money would shut me up. He thought fear would keep me quiet. But the truth was bigger than my fear. Bigger than him. And by the end of the week, the world would know it. Tuesday started with a call from Alicia at 8:07 a.m., her voice crisp and awake in a way I wasn't. Filings are in, she said. Federal whistleblower protections requested. Formal complaints initiated with the Consumer Product Safety Commission and the SEC. Today is about preserving the record. Do not meet anyone from Stone Mount alone. Noted, I said, staring at the steam lifting off my coffee like a warning flare. By mid-morning, Sarah looped me into a secure video call with her team. 2 tracks, she said. Internal notice to Stone Mount's audit committee, so they can't claim surprise, and an external preservation request to their counsel. Once they're on legal notice, destroying evidence becomes a much bigger problem for them. A half hour later, my inbox pinged with a litigation hold notice from Stone Mount's outside counsel, instructing all employees to preserve emails, messages, drafts, even handwritten notes related to product testing and investor communications. I wasn't sure whether to feel relieved or afraid. A hold meant they knew this was real. Mark, the journalist, called after lunch. I'm still verifying, he said, measured, careful. I've spoken with 2 engineers who corroborate pressure on testing. One agreed to go on background if needed. I'm also chasing down the lab. The lab meant the independent facility contracted for thermal and battery tests. Late afternoon, Mark texted, Lab manager won't comment, but gave me report IDs that match your copies. That's as close to confirmation as I'll get before publication. It was a small, sober victory. Wednesday brought a different kind of pressure. HR emailed to clarify that my employment status was under review and requested a meeting to discuss next steps and mutual options. Alicia replied on my behalf. All communication through counsel. Minutes later, my phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize. Ms. Harris, this is Robert Ames, chair of the audit committee. We'd like to speak with you. Today, if possible. My attorney will coordinate, I said. He exhaled, the sound of a man who just realized the ground beneath him had shifted. That evening, Emma came by with takeout and concern in her eyes. We ate quietly at my kitchen table, the way we had when she was little, and homework spread between us like a second meal. Are you scared? She asked finally. Yes, I said, because I wouldn't lie to her. But scared isn't the same as wrong. She reached for my hand. I'm proud of you, Mom. Thursday moved faster. Alicia confirmed the SEC had acknowledged receipt and opened a matter number. The CPSC requested a preliminary call the following Monday. Sarah's team drafted a public statement I could release if Stonemount attacked me personally. Mark called at 5:20 p.m. My editors greenlit a story for tomorrow morning, he said. Careful language, multiple sources, documents reviewed. You won't be named beyond what's already public. Former head of product development. Are you ready? No one is ready for their life to become a headline, but I said yes. I barely slept. At 6:03 a.m., Friday, my phone buzzed with the link. The headline wasn't dramatic. It didn't need to be. Documents suggest safety concerns preceded product launch at Stonemount Technologies. The first paragraph said everything in plain English. Internal emails and test summaries indicated failing results. Leadership pressed to proceed anyway. Investors had received slide decks that omitted failure rates. By 7 a.m., my messages were a wall. Former colleagues, quiet thank yous from people who'd been afraid to speak, a curt no comment forwarded from Stonemount's PR team. At 7:42, a mass email went out to employees. All external inquiries to PR. Do not delete any files. At 8:15, the company's website replaced the triumphant launch banner with a smaller sentence. We are reviewing additional data and will provide an update. The celebration had turned into a pause. Richard left a voicemail at 8:31. I didn't need to listen to the whole thing to hear the rage. You've made a grave mistake. You think anyone will hire you after this? You think you're a hero? You're a liability, Linda. Alicia texted me 2 minutes later. Do not respond. We've preserved the voicemail. At 9:10, Mark sent a screenshot of Stonemount's statement. We take safety seriously, we follow rigorous protocols, we categorically deny falsifying results. The usual choreography. Then, near the bottom, we have placed one executive on administrative leave pending review. No name. They didn't need to spell it out for me. By noon, a second story appeared online. An analyst note, cautious but clear. Short-term volatility expected. Governance risk elevated. Stonemount's stock dipped a few points. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to make the board feel heat. At 12:37, another email from the audit chair. Formal request to meet Monday with the committee and outside counsel. Your attorney is welcome. I forwarded it to Alicia. We'll attend on our terms, she wrote back. Full transcript, no off the record, and they provide their preservation actions in writing. Through the afternoon, the house felt too quiet. I washed dishes I'd already washed, folded the same towel twice. Around 3, Emma texted a photo of a handwritten sign in her campus bookstore window. Be kind to the person in front of you. You don't know what they're carrying. I stared at it longer than made sense and felt my eyes burn. At 4:22 p.m., an unknown number flashed. I let it go to voicemail. A moment later, a text arrived from the same number. I can't call from work. They're moving files out of the shared drive to someone's personal archive. Check timestamps on QA folder Q4-launch. I'm sorry. I didn't recognize the initial, but the detail was too specific to ignore. I called Alicia immediately. If they're touching timestamps after a hold notice, it's serious, she said. Forward me everything. We'll inform counsel and regulators. Now. I forwarded the message to Sarah as well. She replied within minutes. We'll snapshot public-facing artifacts and note any changes. Don't confront anyone directly. As the winter light thinned, I sat in the living room without turning on a lamp. For months, maybe years, the truth had been something I carried alone, heavy and sharp. Now it was out in the world, documented, time-stamped, read by strangers over morning coffee. It should have felt like relief. Instead, it felt like standing in the doorway of a house after the fire's out, counting what's left. At 6:09 p.m., another email landed. This one from an address I didn't expect. rkeller@stonemountTech.com. No subject line, just a single sentence. You don't know what you've done. I closed my laptop and let the room go dark. He was wrong. I knew exactly what I'd done. And on Monday, in a glass-walled conference room with a court reporter and a dozen eyes on me, I would say it all again. Monday morning, the air inside Stonemount's headquarters was different. Gone was the bravado of product launches and investor calls. In its place, silence, broken only by the nervous shuffle of employees avoiding eye contact. Alicia walked beside me, her presence steady. We were escorted into the boardroom where a court reporter waited, fingers poised above the keys. Across the long table sat the audit committee, outside counsel, and Richard himself. His jaw was tight, his suit immaculate, but the confidence I once saw in him was gone. "Ms. Harris," the chair began, "thank you for attending. We want to assure you this meeting is about transparency." I didn't reply. I slid a smaller folder across the table. Alicia spoke for me. "These are supplemental documents. Emails and reports already shared with regulators. We expect written confirmation of how the company intends to preserve all relevant evidence." Richard leaned forward, his voice sharp. "You're destroying this company, Linda. Do you understand that?" I met his eyes for the first time. "No, Richard. You did that when you decided profit mattered more than safety. I just stopped you from burying it." The room went still. The court reporter's keys clicked, every word preserved. For the next 2 hours, I answered questions calmly, fact by fact. No speculation, no theatrics. Just the truth, documented in black and white. By the end, the board members avoided Richard's gaze, their silence louder than any verdict. When it was over, Alicia gathered our things. Outside the building, the winter air bit at my cheeks. She exhaled. "That was it, Linda. You've done your part. Now it's theirs to untangle." Weeks later, headlines confirmed what we already knew. Stonemount announced a recall of its flagship product. Regulators launched full investigations. 2 board members resigned. And Richard Keller? Suspended pending federal inquiry. I wasn't named in the company's statements, but whispers traveled. Some called me a whistleblower, others a traitor. The labels didn't matter. I had Emma to think about, and the quiet certainty that I hadn't looked away when it counted. One evening, sitting with my daughter over takeout again, she asked softly, "Do you regret it?" I thought of the years I gave to Stonemount, of the sleepless nights, the humiliation at that launch. And then I thought of the folder, the court reporter, the truth laid bare. "No," I said finally. "I regret trusting the wrong people for too long, but I don't regret standing up when it mattered." Emma smiled faintly. "That's what I'll remember, Mom. Not the company. You." And that, more than any pension or title, was the legacy I could live with.